Hello and welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history and making things and baking things and generally doing things the long way around. So, what have you been up to recently? Because we normally start by talking about what we've been making.
I've started a punch needle rug
Mm.
because I'm the kind of person that has a favorite kind of snail.
That's why we're friends.
So I'm making a punch needle rug of a grove snail,
Mm.
and it's
What's a
also
grove
going to have the
snail?
word effervescent on it because I'm also far too online.
Okay, that's a meme that I don't know. So,
Um,
uh,
I will explain it to you later.
can
Um,
you explain what a grove snail is?
yeah, so it's a very common kind of snail in the UK. It has sort of an orange shell with a brown stripe going around the spiral. And one
Okay.
time I fell into a red ant nest and didn't get bitten at all, and also found a grove snail shell. So now they're my favorite.
That's an incredibly lucky experience.
So yeah, now I'm making a punch needle rug of a grove snail.
Amazing. In tribute to the mighty grove snail, protector of children who fall in ants' nests.
Oh no, this was like a month ago. I'm not the most stable on my feet.
Okay.
Uh,
So when you said one time, I assumed it was a childhood memory.
oh no.
But no, this one time, like 3 weeks ago.
I also made some toffee apple ice cream.
Ooh. Oh wow, that sounds delicious.
So we did it properly fancy. Made a toffee custard and an apple compote, and then made put the custard in the ice cream machine to make sort of gelato type ice cream, and then put the apple compote on it, and then some salted caramel sauce, and it was very good, and I highly recommend doing exactly that.
Why would you do this to me? I, I've just had breakfast and now I want ice cream.
I'm very sorry.
That sounds delicious.
What
Well,
have you hmm?
yeah, I made some bread.
Bread is good.
For the first time in a while, it was a wholemeal walnut loaf.
Oh.
But I haven't got a lot of experience making wholemeal bread, and I didn't realize that it doesn't rise as much as white flour. So it's a bit dense. But I guess like I mean it tastes good and it's all cooked and everything, so there's nothing wrong with a dense bread, I guess. Um
I like a dense bread personally.
yeah. Apparently it
It's
toasts well, so
mm, it just I don't know, if it feels I don't know if it actually does, but it feels like it fills you up more.
yeah, I think maybe it does because there's the same amount of bread just in a smaller space.
Mm.
Anyway, it's quite nice. Yeah, and
Bread's
I've
what
just been getting very nerdy about my spinning this week.
There's
Um,
absolutely nothing wrong with that.
it's one of those things where like the more about I learn about it, the more I realize how much of a beginner I am, even though I've been spinning for like a year and a half. Well, longer on a drop spindle, but I'm more specifically talking about spinning on a flyer wheel. But um, yeah, so just things like the yarn structure and the amount of twist you put in and how that affects the final yarn that you end up making. Like whether it's a tough yarn or a really soft, bouncy one, or like a drapiness. Like it's really interesting. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm gonna embark on my first garment knitted from hand spun yarn soon. So it's just gonna be a little vest. So I don't need to spend that much. But yeah, that's exciting for
That is
me.
exciting.
Yeah.
Vertical integration.
Huh?
It it was a business joke.
Oh. Sorry, I'm not businessy enough. I don't know how to business, I'm afraid.
Um, so I believe that today's episode is slightly relevant to my ice cream adventure.
It is indeed. I like that actually segues very well. So thank you for making toffee apple ice cream. Um, yeah, I can't believe that we haven't done this yet, but I'm going to talk about apples today. And this might be a bit of a part one, actually, because I don't think I'm going to fit everything I want to say in a reasonable episode length.
Two-part apple special. I'm here for it.
Yeah, so I mean, the part two will probably come somewhat later, but yeah, this is an initial um introduction to the history and folklore of apples. Uh,
I realize I do now have to call this episode Apples 101.
yes, I was hinting at that. Thank you. So, and I want to dedicate this episode actually, because I mean, no, we don't normally do that, but I would like to dedicate this episode to Dr. Amak Jangaliev for reasons that we will go into in a
I think
moment.
I remember this name from when we did domestication.
You probably do, yeah. So I have a bit of a personal connection with the subject of apples as well. My granddad ran an orchard, so it was a fruit and flower farm. So they would grow fruit and flowers to send to market in London and also to sell locally. And they grew a lot of apples, as you might expect. Them sort of being one of the most ubiquitous British fruits, and the southeast was known for its apple growing.
But yeah, apples
Um,
are like the default fruit in Britain, aren't they?
yeah, so actually, as we were talking about before the episode, we were chatting, and Liz mentioned apple being like, oh, is it you said apples were your favorite fruit, and then you were like, I'm so basic.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, let me tell you, there is nothing basic about apples, and I will die on this hill. Yeah, so we still have my mum has actually become because she would work on the orchard when she was younger. And it's kind of a passion of hers as well, and she grows lots of apple. We have like 10 different apple varieties in the garden.
Awesome.
Um, yes. So it's actually been a mission this summer. I want to learn fruit tree pruning from her. Um, so yeah, hopefully I will actually know how to properly grow an apple tree. Um, so apples are like we said, something that's considered quite basic, but they're everywhere in mythology and like folk culture as well. Like
Mm.
they're a very symbolic fruit. I possibly most famously is the apple of Eden in the Bible. But that one, interestingly, probably wasn't an apple. Um, like it doesn't actually say it's an apple in the
Yeah,
Bible. It
it's
just
just a
says
fruit.
the fruit of knowledge. Yeah. Um, but but Western culture has just decided that's an apple. Um, because we already have this symbolism of the apple being something like almost mythical, something that represents like a beauty and sexuality and fertility and all that jazz.
Yeah, because it
Um,
pops up in the Trojan Wars, doesn't it?
yes, the apple of
The
discord.
the apple that goes to the fairest, and then the Trojan Wars happen as a direct result.
Yeah, which I only learned fairly recently, actually. So yeah, an apple is directly responsible for the Trojan War if you look at it in that kind. I mean, there's a lot of other people that are
Yeah,
directly responsible
it
for the Trojan War.
it
No
sets off the
one,
Rube Goldberg machine of the Trojan War.
yeah. um, but yeah, so an apple inscribed to the fairest is dropped into a party into the middle of three goddesses by Eris, the goddess of discord. Um, and this apple is what represents the most beautiful goddess and what starts off the Trojan War. So again, apples being associated with both beauty and discord, chaos. Um, we also have the apples of youth in Norse mythology that
Oh,
are,
Ethan.
yes, Ethan. And I always thought, because I had a book of myths when I was a kid, and it spelled the goddess's name Eden, and I thought that was what she was called. But then I saw it recently and realized, oh no, it's an F. Um, yeah, so it is pronounced Ethan, right?
I think so, yeah, but I've normally see it transliterated starting with an I as well, but
Yeah,
that is the thing with transliteration. It's you kind of do what you want to make the sounds right.
exactly. Yeah. So anyway, we have the apples of youth in a Norse mythology, of which there are various shenanigans from people trying to steal them and or gods. Um, and isn't one of the famous ones where Loki steals them, and then the gods start getting old, and they're just like, oh no, what's happening?
I haven't read that one, but it would not surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah, so there we go again, associated with long life, fertility. Apparently, in Chinese culture, the apple blossom is a symbol of female beauty. In the 1001 Nights, there's a story that involves a magical apple from Samarkand that can heal any illness. And then we have things like the in Britain the custom of wassailing. So in the beginning of the year, you go around all of your apple trees with a mug of cider and you sing a song and you pour the cider on the roots of the apple trees to ensure like a good crop of apples in the coming year. Um, and I think that's also part of a wider custom of like people would go around all of the places on the farm and just do a general like blessings for the new year and stuff.
Mm. But I
Um,
mean, in Irish mythology as well, apples show up being associated with the other world.
okay.
I
Ah.
think it's the story of Bran. They grow on this branch in actually in the other world.
Oh wow. Okay, I didn't know that one. Yeah, so they're kind of everywhere.
Mm.
And not just in Western mythology where you would think they might be more associated. And that's because apples were actually distributed along the Silk Road routes. So
Okay.
they kind of ended up going sort of west towards Europe and east towards China. And then eventually over to North America as well. So that's why they're kind of everywhere across like Eurasia and then North America.
So
Um,
where did they actually come from then? Because the Silk Road is a large area.
yes, and I'm very glad you asked me that because it's going to take us to the Tian Shan Mountains in Kazakhstan.
Oh.
Now, apples are members of the Rosaceae family. Rosaceae? I don't know Latin. Um, so the same family as other fruit trees like plum and pear. Um, but the thing about apples is that you can't take a seed and then grow the same apple.
What?
Um, yeah. which is why all those apple trees that Johnny Appleseed famously planted across the US, most of them are just wild apples.
So what apples does it just make,
It
like, pre-domestication apples?
kind of, yeah. It's kind of like
Ow!
you don't know what you're gonna get. Um, when you plant an apple seed, it will grow a tree, but that apple tree won't necessarily be the variety of apple that you took the seed from.
How
Um,
though?
um, I think it's because so I'm not a biologist. I spend a lot of time like pointing out that I'm not in any way a scientist on this channel, but but yeah. So I think it's got something to do with the the way that the apple is domesticated. Um, is like you can't domesticate it in the traditional sense of like I'm gonna like have these two plants and like breed them together and then get like a mix of different characteristics because the apple will always revert to its kind of wild genes as it were, um because what's contained in that seed is just no matter what you grow from it, it will have the same kind of seed in it. So it yeah.
How do you make different varieties then if you can't breed the apples?
You graft them. So grafting is a process by which you take a small part of the tree that you want to grow, and then you take a rootstock, um, which is just the root. So there are a few different types of rootstock hanging around, but there's kind of mainly one that is used mostly in Europe because it's like a hard wearing, a very hardy kind of tree. So they use like that is the basis of the tree, and then you make a cut into the tree. It doesn't have to be a particularly deep cut, but you sort of make a diagonal cut into the tree, and then you stick in your bit of the variety that you want to grow, and you bind it on there, and you just let them meld together. Yeah, and so you can have trees with 3, 4 different kinds of apple on them.
You're right, apples are not basic. Apples are Frankenstein fruits.
Hmm. Basically, you can even have trees with that are apple and pear because they're the same family.
Sure.
Yeah.
I wonder how many different fruits you could graft onto one tree.
I wonder how many. I think you can get quite a few on there. I'm sure I've heard of particularly 19th century like rich people's gardens. They loved that kind of stuff.
That
Like,
makes
oh,
a lot of sense.
come and see my amazing tree that has like 5 different fruits on it.
I
Yeah,
want one.
I know, right? So and we have, the whole legend with Isaac Newton and the apple tree.
Oh yeah.
Well, that apple tree was apparently a flower of Kent. Was like the tree that was in the garden of his house, and the University of York physics department has a graft of that tree in its courtyard, which is quite
That's
cool.
cool. So if you live in York, you can get an apple that is basically cloned from Isaac Newton's tree.
Yeah, and
I
the
know we have people listening who live in York.
yes, apparently the physics like welcome party for freshers is an apple pie party with apples from that tree.
That's adorable.
It's really cute. Anyway, so um this is relevant to the mountains of Chanshan, Kazakhstan, because in the mountains of Chanshan in Kazakhstan is an apple forest that it's very, very old, like very, very old. And it contains a wide variety of apple trees, wild apple trees, where the apples are edible. And that's kind of a big deal because most wild apples are not that great. Like
Mm.
crab apples are just famously quite small, hard, and sour. Although they can make good jam. But you wouldn't just eat them off the tree. But the apples in this forest, there are ones that you can just eat off the tree. And so that the prevailing theory is that that is where these different varieties of apple spread from along the Silk Road.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, basically from this area. I mean, there may have been more across the area, but this forest is kind of the only one left that we know of. Um, so yeah, so apparently, um, it it it's like 165 million years ago that this forest developed, um, which is incredible. Um, so it's the Malus sieversii, which is the variety that grows in this forest. And it in the early 20th century, um, it started to be studied.
Mhm.
So the well-known Russian biologist Nikolai Vavilov was the first to discover the apples in this forest. But unfortunately, he didn't have a chance to continue his work because he was sent to the Gulag by Stalin. And
Then
then, um, but the work was continued by the Kazakh scientist Amak Jangaliev, who basically it was his life's work, um, classifying the apples in this forest, studying them. Like he had this massive thesis that was a detailed, um, like a book of every information on like every tree in the forest, basically every kind of apple. Um, and yeah, he just did so much work on it. Um, between the 1930s and when he passed away in 2009. And he actually got in quite a lot of trouble for this because, as part of Stalin's policy of developing these areas, like he basically wanted to cut it all down and have industry in that area. And Jangaliev was like, no, I don't think you should do that. And so
savior of the apples.
yeah, he basically put his whole life's work into preserving this forest as well, and like saving this knowledge for future generations. And it got him. So I got most of this information from a film called Les Origines de la Pomme, by a French filmmaker. And she, I believe, worked with Jangaliev, and she basically made this film about his life, but also the origins of the apple. Um, and so I haven't watched the film in a while, so I can't remember exactly what happened. But if I remember correctly, he ended up getting exiled from Kazakhstan. But then after the end of the Cold War, he went straight back and continued his work. Um,
I love him.
and yeah, and ended up setting up this organization to like preserve this forest because he believed it was very important because a lot of the apple varieties we have today are quite susceptible to pests
Mhm.
and to diseases, and this original apple forest has varieties or types of apple that are naturally resistant, and so they could be used to develop varieties that are more resilient. In the case of something like that disease that killed off like all of the bananas.
Right.
um, yeah,
I would
Yeah.
not I would not want to lose the apples.
Mm.
This
And
guy is like I was kind of joking when I called him the savior of the apples, but I think he might actually be the savior of the
he
apples.
really is. He really is. I just he that's why I wanted to dedicate this episode to him because I think he was a wonderful man. um yeah. So that is the origin of the apple, which then traveled out on the trading routes across Europe and Asia, and obviously became really popular because it's delicious. And that was aided by the development of grafting, which no one knows exactly when or where that was invented because it's one of those techniques that seems to be invented kind of independently of each other around the same time because it's just a thing that everyone wants to do.
Mhm.
Um, However, there is a reference to it around 300 BC by Theophrastus, a pupil of Aristotle, who wrote a treatise on propagation and describes a variation of grafting using a rootstock. Um,
Okay, so
so
figured that out fairly early then.
yeah, yeah. It's thought that that was, part of the and not part of the initial agricultural revolution, but still quite an early development.
That makes sense.
Um, and so then we are able to spread these apple varieties around and to make new varieties. And so you get like there's like hundreds, if not thousands, of different apple varieties in the world. Um, and some of them are really old. For example, there's a variety called Corpen du Plat that was thought to have been brought to Britain by the Romans and is still grown in some places today. And I think we might have one actually, which is it's a nice eating apple.
Mhm.
Um, and then we've got eating apples and cooking apples, of course. So things like your Bramleys, your early Arthur Turners, um, cooking apples, and then so their flavor is more brought out um, once the cooking process happens, and then you've got the eating apples, which obviously you can just pick off the tree and are delicious and like loads of different flavors of apple. So I could go on about this, but yeah. So you've got these apples all across Europe and Asia as well, and then moving across to North America with settlers. And you have the famous story of Johnny Appleseed, who moves across the country, going west and planting apples everywhere, so that when people arrive, they'll be able to have food. Yeah, which, as I've just explained, if he
Not
was doing
not
it from
the best way
seed,
of doing it.
it's not really going to work.
He was
I
doing his
mean,
best.
yeah, yeah, like it's a cool idea. Um,
Although,
and
I don't know, the story of Johnny Appleseed feels kind of weird because it's like, there was definitely nothing to eat here before planting apples.
yeah.
Ignore those thriving societies over there.
Yes, I mean it's not like there was no substitute for the apple. Um but yeah. So in the 19th century, this sort of really took off with the the development of loads of new varieties. I mean, slightly partly in the 18th century as well, but the 19th century being one of industrial revolution in many places. That also extended to agriculture, and people were wanting to develop, new varieties of food as well that could sort of be scaled up to feed these new societies. And it wasn't just states and governments doing this. It was also, everyone who was rich enough to have a big garden kind of wanted in on it. Like it was kind of a little status symbol almost to like, oh, here's this new variety that was created by my gardener in my garden. So it wasn't like most of these people were doing it themselves. Like they all had gardeners.
Yeah,
um,
it was kind of the big hobby for vicars at that time, wasn't it? It was like, "I'm gonna invent a new rose."
oh yeah, roses is one of the famous ones as well. And in fact, they are same family because roses produce a fruit, rose hips. Um,
Oh, delicious.
yeah, I'm gonna make some rose hip syrup in a few weeks. It's gonna be great. Full of vitamin C.
Yeah,
So,
I make rosehip tea quite a lot in the winter.
oh, nice. Uh, yeah, so then you get a lot of these new varieties of apple being developed and named after the lord or lady of the manor. So we've got a Lord Derby and a Lady Sudley in our garden, and Arthur Turner, which I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes they end up being named after the actual person that either made or discovered them. For example, Granny Smith. Granny Smith was from Sussex. She emigrated to Australia, and she found this apple tree growing just just around, and she kind of asked people, and they were like, "Oh, I don't know, that's just always been there." And she thought the apples were quite nice, and then she sort of took a graft and started spreading them around, and that's why Granny Smiths are called Granny Smiths.
So she didn't actually invent the Granny Smiths thing,
She,
she marketed them.
no, she just found it apparently. Yeah.
Which
Um,
presumably from what you've said means that someone else invented that variety and either took it to Australia or invented it in Australia, and then she was just like, "This is mine now."
I mean, it sounds like it might be one of those that was not necessarily invented by someone, but it just happened.
Okay.
Or possibly it was in someone's garden and then there wasn't a garden anymore, but the tree was still there and then it was found. Yeah.
I don't know, Granny
Um,
Smith is on thin ice.
we will find out more. We will continue with the trial of Granny Smith in the next episode.
Yeah, part when we do apples part 2.
um, yeah, so uh, and then we get to today, we have these trademarked varieties of apple, like Pink Lady. You might notice that's always sold as a brand, like
Mm.
it's a registered trademark, the Pink Lady apple. Um, so like presumably you can't just grow that in your garden and then sell it. I don't know. Um, yeah, but like
Break into
sadly,
the Pink Lady factory.
yeah. If anyone wants to guerrilla grow these, you have my blessing. Um,
You won't
so,
help, you just stand there like, "Yeah."
but yeah, sadly, you can't get most varieties in the supermarket. You get your Galas, your Braeburns, your Granny Smiths, your Golden Delicious, which
Why?
I have family beef with Golden Delicious.
Oh, family beef.
I
See, I
have
just have beef because they're not delicious.
they are not, but also I have inherited grudges against the Golden Delicious apple.
I mean, you have to elaborate now.
So, the Golden Delicious was heavily marketed by the French government in the 1960s and 70s as this. delicious apple. They had this advert that was like, it's all about Le Crunch. And it worked. And were these were like really marketed in Britain and sold there. And my grandfather, as you might expect, being the owner of an apple related business, was not too happy about this. But ironically, the Golden Delicious apple tastes better if it's grown in Britain.
Is
It's
that
not
to do
that
with the soil or something?
I'm not sure exactly what it is. It might be something to do with the climate. Like it actually prefers a more temperate climate. Um, but yeah, it just the ones that are grown in like this really warm south of France climate, they don't taste of much. So yeah, so like not that delicious. And also interloper. I know that's not fair because everything's an interloper once you get far down enough. But
Bloody
like
foreign
it's
apples.
it's just it's just my like family loyalty, you know? Yeah.
That's
So
beautiful.
that's why I am prejudiced against the Golden Delicious apple. But yeah, it's unfortunately a lot of these older varieties, or even these just more diverse varieties, they're dying out because they're not as commercially viable. Like you can't just either they don't keep for long enough, or they're not big enough, or I mean even you can only get one variety of cooking apple in most shops, and that's the Bramley. Um, and even then, like they only sell like there's just one crate of it. It's not like there's a whole row of the different varieties of eating apple, and then there's just one small amount of cooking apple.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
I I have a problem with the lack of variety of apples in supermarkets because they've stopped selling my favorite apple,
really, what's that?
Cox's orange pippin.
Oh, I love a Cox.
I I I've stopped seeing them in supermarkets.
Oh no. Yeah. I I didn't know that. That's such a shame. Um yeah, so I and things like we have an Ellison's orange, which is an apple that tastes orangey and it's
Oh,
amazing. But it would never be grown commercially because they're small and they go a bit soft after a couple of weeks. um yeah, there's just it just makes me sad that things like this will probably end up being lost. Although um there's definitely a lot of organizations and individuals that care about this sort of thing and want to
mm,
preserve these varieties um, and keep them going. And you can even, although there's been a decline in apple orchards in a lot of places in the last century, that doesn't mean the trees have gone. A lot of times, like the orchard might have gone out of business, but they didn't just cut all the trees down. Like, if the land hasn't been developed, they're still there, or even if it has, there might be one or two of them still around. So,
yeah, just cutting them down would just cost more money, wouldn't it?
yeah. So you can just find old apple trees hanging around, and it can be fairly easy to identify the apples, and then you could just take a little graft of it and grow it at home. Um, so you know, and that is actually how quite a few varieties have been rediscovered. Um, yeah, so it's not all a bleak outlook. Um, and thanks to the dedicated work of people like Amak Jangaliev, um, the the progenitor of the domesticated apple is still there and could be used to develop new varieties. So it's it's actually good. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so that's where I'm gonna leave it for the moment. Because I mean obviously I've missed quite a lot out there. But yeah, it's just gonna go on forever if I try and talk about the entire history of the apple. So I think yeah, if in the future when we do sort of a part two, I'll probably talk more about how it was used in recipes historically, how it was stored, like different kinds of varieties that were popular in different parts of the world, that kind of thing. Um, but for now, I just wanted to go with kind of the origins of the apple and the varieties, why we have so many, and how it's spread, and that kind of thing. Um, there we go.
Well, you've definitely made me want to eat an apple.
There you go.
And
That's
welcome
sort of
to
an appetizer.
Kazakhstan.
I know. Like if I could one day visit this forest, that would be like an absolute dream. But yeah,
One day.
one day. There is a movement now in Kazakhstan apparently to conserve the apple. And in fact, the I'm just gonna check on this, but I'm pretty sure what I read was correct. That the capital. Oh no, okay, it's not.
Just cut that out.
Ah, okay. Ah, okay, I wasn't wrong exactly. So Almaty, which was the capital of Kazakhstan from 1929 to 1997, um, it literally means like Apple City.
I like that.
Yeah. But sadly, a lot of the apples, like most of the apples available in Kazakhstan today, aren't grown there. They're Chinese apples. So, but yeah, there's apparently there is now thanks to the work of these people, there's now um like a push to take care of this place in Kazakhstan, and there's like an organization that advocates for um for preserving it and taking care of it, which is great. Okay. So what's our local larder today?
Um, I wanted to talk about tequila
Oh,
and mezcal.
okay.
Um, well, I recently learned that the tequila and mezcal have kind of a squares and rectangles thing. Um, so I thought I would talk about it, which I think should be a nice short one to go with the long apples.
Yeah, sorry, I've got no idea how long I just talked for.
Um, so like I said, it's kind of a squares and rectangles thing where all tequila is mezcal, but not all mezcal is tequila.
Right.
So mezcal is a liquor distilled from agave.
Hmm.
Um, there's about 30 different types of agave that you can use. Tequila is specifically distilled from the blue agave and
Right.
also has I don't know if it's a UNESCO geographical thing or if it's just a that this is widely accepted, but it also has to be distilled in the Mexican state of Jalisco.
Okay. Oh, so it's like a an origin thing.
Yeah, tequila is
Hmm.
specifically from that one agave and made in that one state.
I see. Oh, so does it have a different I assume it has a different taste from the other agave plants then.
Yeah, the blue agave has a sweeter taste to it.
Ah,
So tequila is going
wow.
to taste different from most other mezcal.
Mhm. I assume the 1 pound tequila shots that they served at Willow were not the certified
Oh, Willow.
tequila.
Um, I mean, they might have been, because a lot of tequila is produced. Um, but it might have been mezcal.
Okay. Well, so is mezcal like a cheaper version or?
Well, mezcal is the general name for distilled agave, basically. If it's a drink made from agave cactus, it's a mezcal.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh, so kind of how champagne is a wine, but like a sparkling wine, but it's only champagne if it comes from that specific region.
Exactly, it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like here is a highly specific variety of this drink. It's
Okay.
different. I think mezcal is less well known as a
Oh,
word than
okay.
tequila is in the UK.
Right. Yeah, because I've heard, or sometimes like they will have mezcal in a bar, and I've been like, oh, what's that? But I know what tequila is.
Yeah. Um, yes. So mezcal generally probably goes back to at least the Olmec civilization.
Wow.
We know that the Aztecs made it because we have accounts from Don Pedro Sanchez de Tangle, Tangle,
Hmm.
um, was a conquistador. Um, yeah, accounts from him and other conquistadors of basically they ran out of brandy and started copying the Aztecs who were making mezcal. Um, but we now think that they probably themselves got the idea from the Olmec.
Okay.
But yeah, this guy Don Pedro sets up a tequila factory in Jalisco in about 1600. Um, and tequila started being made. You know when things say by royal decree?
Hmm.
There was tequila by royal decree, under license from the Spanish King Carlos IV, the Cuervo family, who still make it. It's the fifth
Hmm.
biggest brand of tequila. Is Cuervo, the US, and then elsewhere in the 1880s,
Okay.
as tequila. So I think possibly the reason that tequila is more well known than mezcal generally is because that's what was exported, was specifically the tequila.
Ah, I see.
Um, but yeah, it started sort of becoming a generic term for mezcal until the Mexican government in 1974 said, no, this is what tequila is.
Hmm.
It's different from mezcal, and it's also ours. It's Mexican intellectual property.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, there are over 900 brands of tequila.
Wow.
And then obviously elsewhere in largely Mexico, but also other places in South and Central America, and I think there's a couple of places in the southern states as well, make
Hmm.
mezcal. So it's this huge thing.
Yeah, that is a big industry.
Um, Interestingly, the Tequila Regulatory Council of Mexico only allowed flavored tequilas to be called tequila in 2004.
Okay, it's interesting.
I mean, it's big business for Mexico,
Yeah.
as you can tell from the existence of 900 different brands. So it makes sense that they want to protect it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, much like Italian cheeses.
Mm. But I mean, it's like George Clooney has a brand of tequila.
Really? Wait, does it if someone wanted to say if I wanted to have my own brand of tequila, would I still have to have it produced in Mexico?
Oh yeah, otherwise it wouldn't be
Otherwise
tequila.
it would be tequila, yes.
Well,
Great.
specifically, you would have to have it produced in Jalisco,
Oh,
in
right, yeah.
Jalisco.
Wow.
But yeah,
A lot
there's
of,
the tequila brand Casamigos, portmanteau of Casa and Amigos. Very creative, George. Was co-founded by George Clooney
uh,
in 2013.
wait, doesn't that just mean house friends?
Yeah, it's a portmanteau of House and Friends.
House friends.
Or friends.
Uh,
But yeah, then tequila really takes off in 1936 with the invention of the margarita.
okay, yeah.
And yeah, like I said, it's now this huge thing. You get craft tequilas, like same as you get craft beers.
Mhm.
Um, there's tequila variations of existing cocktails, like the Oaxaca Old Fashioned, which is an old fashioned but
Ooh,
made with tequila.
wow. Sounds interesting. Huh?
Um, yeah, and mezcal just doesn't, mezcal doesn't have novelty songs written about it. Um, Also tends to be darker in color, interestingly. I don't
Okay.
Presumably something to do with the makeup of the blue agave.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, it's a short local larder, but I did not know that tequila was mezcal or that it was such a huge thing, and I thought that you would find that interesting.
I did find it very interesting. Like, I'm not a regular tequila drinker, shall we say? Um, but yeah, I really want to try just mezcal now.
Mm.
Hmm. Oh, thanks for
So
enabling me.
I've given you an excuse to buy alcohol.
Yes.
So thank you for listening. If you want to support us and maybe help us one day go to the apple forest in Kazakhstan, we would need a lot of patrons for that, but we are on
Yeah.
Patreon as Bread and Thread.
You can also find us on Twitter at Bread and Thread, where we'll have teasers for upcoming episodes, interesting facts, and pictures and things from episodes.
We also post those same things on Tumblr as Bread and Thread.
We are on YouTube, also as Bread and Thread.
The branding is strong. If you want to suggest an episode or a local larder or just say hi, you can email breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com. And I think that's everything.
Is
We
that
will
yeah, I think that's all the pies that we have our fingers in.
So we will be back in a couple of weeks.